Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the third in our series of Smarter Practice, Brighter Future webinars. In previous webinars, we've already covered productivity gaps, missed opportunities, and we've looked at rewriting the future. I'm joined here by Alan and Ramesh.
Hi.
And it is a beautiful sunny morning here in Macclesfield. So without further ado, let's get started. So I'm Richard Higginbotham. I'm Product and Professional Services Director at VaultConnect. So we help our clients secure and automate their critical processes. I'm delighted to be joined as ever by Alan from MRW Corporate Solutions. What's your role, Alan?
I'm a business performance coach, and I work with professional service firms to help them improve their productivity, and with accountancy firms in particular to develop advisory services. I'm
also joined here by our host, Ramesh from Cevitr.
Yeah. Hi, Richard. Cevitr helps companies to improve productivity with the help of a digital workforce. Prior to Cevitr, I was part of big IT with large, IT firms such as Tata and Harman, but then decided that technology of a breakthrough nature needs to be accessible to all, and especially the small to medium enterprises. And that's why Cevitr.
Very good. We'll talk through some exciting stuff very shortly. So the format of this morning is, as with previous webinars, we aim for around about 30 minutes presentation. We have a lot of discussion to get through this morning, but then that leaves you in the audience 10 to 15 minutes at the end for question and answers. We will definitely aim to get you away from here by 11:45. If you have a question at any time, use the Q&A button in the application. If I spot it come up and we can answer it there and then, we will do. If not, we'll answer it at the end. Any that we're unable to answer in full during the course of the webinar, we will certainly circulate to everybody afterwards. And a recording of the webinar will be available on demand after the event on the same link that you've registered with. So when the wind of change blows, it's undoubted that there is some change taking place in the accountancy sector. Do you see that reflected in the practices that you work with, Alan?
Certainly, everybody's aware that the wind is blowing.
Mm-hmm.
There aren't many firms that are doing a lot about it. It's a lot of talk,
yes,
but not much action.
Yes, and I think I picked up a piece of research taken from Sage earlier on this year. I was quite alarmed actually to see that 10% of accountants see no cultural shift in accounting. There's also what's driving those change, and I guess there's myriad forces at work to drive some of that change within the sector. And I guess when I see just over a third saying that it's being driven by client and market demands, there's a lot taking place in there. I would have thought it is in most industries, it's changes in consumer behavior or changes in client behavior that drives change. Can you see a reason why that maybe isn't the case in this sector?
I think there are two reasons. One is, even now, we are software driven.
Mm-hmm.
There are a few suppliers, which shall remain nameless, who don't rush to change things.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do want a big modification in what you're doing, it's a long-term project and a lot of money is involved.
Okay. And in previous webinars, you've used your now famous Henry Ford quote.
Oh, yes. It's also the fact that clients don't always understand what is available to them and therefore what they need. And Henry Ford said, if I'd asked my customers what they wanted, they would just have asked for a faster horse.
Right. Yeah. And that's very true. We mentioned technology, and in the last webinar, or in the first webinar, we kind of mentioned that there was some very bleak statistics around and some predictions within there. I think our own Office of National Statistics predicting that 25% of, or more than a quarter of chartered and certified accountants in England and Wales at risk of losing their jobs. And my new favorite website, willrobotstakemyjob.com, highlighting 94% likelihood of automation taking accounting jobs. Now, I think we've covered off the fact that there's more opportunity than threats in there, but there's a lot of pressure building towards this change. So when we look at the services that firms undertake, we've talked about the traditional services taking place. And again, going back to the practice of now, Sage, when asked what services does your firm specifically undertake, we've got 80% of accountants are offering accounting and bookkeeping, and it's payroll, it's tax, it's compliance. Those are the services that are...
It's relating to numbers, and it's kind of sticking to the knitting.
Mm-hmm. And there's some real importance to those services as well, isn't there? Is if you are going to win clients, those are the services that clients come to you for.
That's what they expect you to do, although as years go by, they become more and more commoditized and more price driven.
Mm-hmm. And so because everybody's offering them, there's a similar standard in the marketplace, margins are squeezed. Now you carried out a piece of work, Alan, around the productivity that we covered in our first webinar, which was around the productivity gap. You measured that there was a £10,000 profit per fee earner gap in profit in a small
Yes, an
practice.
opportunity to close that gap.
And what's behind that productivity gap?
Built-in inefficiencies
Mm-hmm.
of the way we do stuff.
Yep. So we're busy being busy, but we're not maximising the opportunity we've got within the services
Correct.
that we offer.
I think professional services suffers from people wanting to be seen to be busy because that makes them important
Mm-hmm.
for the future.
Yep. And so we end up in this loop of it's compliance work, it's basic services. We maybe have an inefficient business model, and it's, you describe it as compliance lock.
Because that's where all your resources go.
Mm-hmm. Now, there's a Chinese proverb, which is when the wind of weight change blows, some people build walls, others build windmills. Are there practices out there who are building windmills?
Yes, in my experience there are, but they're few and far between. Lots of people talking about it, not so many people doing anything about it.
Mm-hmm. And is it these challenges that practices face that's forming such a large barrier? I mean, we've talked about compound challenges, really. We've got compliance lock, so process-driven, transaction-based, low-margin work, busy being busy.
Yep.
That is, if you're working in the business, you can't work on the business. And if it's deadline driven, it's getting stuff through, it's churning through the work, that doesn't give you much opportunity for change.
No, it doesn't. But if you're going to do any meaningful change, you have to put a little bit of time aside, even an hour a week. You can move mountains every year. Yeah.
There's also the advances of technology, and it is, and I guess is you have the software that you use, but you also have things like making tax digital and government regulation that relies on technology. That means that you've got to keep pace in there. So although technology should be freeing it up, actually in some ways it can tie us down as well.
Yes, it's very demanding. But once we settle our clients in the cloud, we have a huge amount of data available to us, which again, not many people are doing very much with.
Yep. And we've talked before, Ramesh, in past webinars about technology can be seen as almost a silver bullet. If I implement this software, I will get. But it's never that simple, is it?
No, because a lot of time the technology change that is being implemented is being forced upon by regulation or by need. It's not thought through as how can I make my life easier with technology to do more productive work.
Yep. And certainly investment in bigger software is usually software that's been developed to help you do the job that you're already doing. And it still requires implementation and change to do that, rather than software that's going to enable you to transform.
Absolutely, because in many ways, sometimes, enabling the technology itself is more painful than using the technology in the end.
Yes, I think we've all been there.
Absolutely.
And lastly, you've got what clients want versus what clients need. So if clients want compliance and basic services as low cost and minimum admin for them, that's what they will demand, as opposed to coming to you and asking you for stuff that you'd really like to do for them.
It's very much an education piece of saying to the client, we can do that you've asked for, but actually have a think of try this. You go into an ice cream shop and they let you try a little scoop of something and try before you buy.
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, the advisory opportunity isn't news, is it? So why aren't firms getting to it?
Well, I think we've said why. It's because they are up to their neck doing the basic work, the compliance work, and therefore don't have enough hours in the day to devote a little bit of time to developing these new services.
Well, I guess that's reflected. I mean, this survey, I mean, the presentation of the graphs is somewhat complicated, but in short, what this is showing is that the vast majority of firms estimate that they're doing very little advisory work or billing for very little advisory work. And the vast majority would like to be billing for a much, much higher proportion within there. So we know what's holding them back. It's the challenges, it's the compliance lock, it's being busy. So how do we break through? Well, I guess the first thing is are you ready to change? And we visited this slide in the last one, and we agreed that there's three clusters within there. There's even a cluster in there for whom they have no interest in making the change at all. And there's some very valid reasons for that, aren't there, Alan?
Well, usually that's an older practitioner who is well within sight of his retirement and feels he's had enough change in his business life. He just wants to coast and collect his pension.
So yeah, if there's going to be fundamental changes in the next 5 years, in 5 years' time, they'll have fundamental change of their own.
Correct.
The second group is kind of the visionary delegators, the people who are, I can see the future, team, you need to do this. But that brings its own challenges, doesn't it?
Yes, because the team might not see the same future as you see. And as you'll see from the future slide, where we look at the 5 business advisory phases, there's a lot of development, personal development involved in bringing this to happen.
And then that last cluster of people who are, we're going to go there, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to make it happen. But they're the people who are kind of very hands-on and quite often tied down in just making their business do what it does today.
Yes.
So the challenge here is one of planning, management, control, and time. And so if we break that down, it starts with strategy. It's about having a vision, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So you've got to know where you're going. And so that's which services. So what type of services are available? Which clients? How? You mentioned people, Alan. People aren't just sat there ready to change their role, are they?
No, and of course we recruit for one role, and that role's changed over the years, and we perhaps haven't trained as well as we should have done.
Yeah.
And this is a big personal development and training requirement and opportunity.
So process, what jobs will need to be done in an advisory environment? How? By whom or by what? Even if we're kind of building that into there. That requires some planning, doesn't it?
It requires a lot of detail and a lot of planning, and like any plan, it won't go according to how you want it to go. You have to change it. You need to review that every 90 days.
Yeah.
It's a lot of resource.
Yeah. And lastly, we mentioned technology is it doesn't feel like something I'm going to be able to download something from the cloud and get started and I'm suddenly an advisory practice. But technology should be an enabler. But why? Which software? How much do you spend? Do you build it, buy it, rent it? There's a lot of decisions to be made about that technology, isn't there?
There are, certainly. And if we use the technology that Ramesh has got, that will enable some thinking time to be released.
Yeah, and to that point, Alan and Richard, many a time, even the visionaries that you talked about in the previous slide do not have a view on what's out there to help them realize that.
Yeah.
So actually, when you see the slide where you have a strategy which is driven by the people and process and enabled by technology, you can turn it on its head and say, what is the strategy that you want to drive? But do I have the ability actually to do it now, today, without delaying any further or investing much higher? And we'll talk about that in a bit.
And this is a conversation we've had over coffee a number of times, Alan, is most owners, managing partners of practices are supremely good technical accounting. They are very good at doing the job they do. They're not technologists. They're not business transformation experts, are they?
No, that's right. And the trouble with accountants is the way we're trained. We think in tramlines. I learned tax. I learned how to put accounts together. I've kept up to date in those areas. I can advise on them. I don't want to go away from those tracks because I'm uncomfortable and I'm not properly trained. Well, we can change all of that, as you'll see later.
Okay. Now you help professional services organizations. That is your day job. Now you've very kindly shared as a framework here that helps people kind of go through and break down some of these decisions. And you talk about 5 phases of advisory work.
Absolutely. And you can see them up there where we start with the data, the facts and the figures. Well, we can all do that in our sleep as accountants. That's a given. The insights from those follows. And I think, again, most people with a little bit of help can get into dealing with the insights. The key to developing your advisory strategy is the problem solving, helping clients with strategy, and finally the implementation. And the further we go along, the harder it gets. But if we actually look at the second part of the slide, this is telling us the kinds of service that fit into those categories, which I won't go through in detail because we're going to run out of time, and who in your team might be suitable to deliver them.
So if we step through these, so if I'm going to provide data, those services might be simple questionnaires, discussions, and probably any team member with a basic business acumen is capable of doing it. But if you're going to move that to insights, you start to see that there's a requirement for additional skills.
That's right. So someone a little higher up the food chain in your practice will be able to do that, but not an initial trainee. And then the problem solving, you can learn some problem solving techniques. You can teach them to your team. They're very effective. And the best way of developing these things is actually to use them on the practice first.
And as we move further forward,
we then get into specialist strategic advice, facilitating, running client away days, planning meetings, that sort of thing. And finally, we have the implementation. And that's where your most experienced people will be placed.
So already within there, I guess, do people use this as a diagnostic?
Absolutely. I use it as a diagnostic with clients. Having explained it, you say to them, right, plot on there where you are now.
Yep.
Have a look at where you'd like to be in, say, 3 years' time. Now we can generate some actions that take us along that journey.
Okay. And so what we've got there is I've now got a view of where I'm going. I've got some stages that I know that I'm going to go through. I can see that there's going to be some people change along the way. I've got a plan.
Absolutely.
So surely I can take this leap of faith. I can just start and just go for it.
Provided you're prepared to put enough resource into it. Because there's a pace and the depth.
Yep.
And you've got to decide, am I going to skate on the surface and am I going to dig down?
Yep.
There's no right answer. It's what fits you and your business and your people.
Now, all of us have kind of worked through change in various businesses, and momentum is really, really important, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
is if you start off in a direction and it stalls, then the whole lot grinds to a halt. I mean, Ramesh, you must have seen that in big software and
Absolutely.
technology projects.
Absolutely, and that's what all businesses, any size, is trying to solve at the moment.
Yes, and so that momentum is important. So you need to have early wins, and you need to continue to have wins. So you have to break that down into small chunks.
Correct.
So I'm now starting to feel kind of a little. Actually, this is actually a management challenge.
Yes. And if you like, it's a bandwidth challenge to management, that you need to put some investment time away each week and each month to take you on this journey.
So that journey is going to have a profound impact on probably the shape of the practice, isn't it?
Yes, the ratio of staff, chargeable staff to directors or partners will change because the depth of work changes.
Yeah. So if we kind of said, well, it is in a typical practice, a very, very basic level, we'll have a few leaders, a few more managers, and some operations people who to do the work. That's the structure today, but in future that's going to look slightly different, isn't it?
Yes, it's going to be a shallower structure.
And so what we'll see is maybe a little bit more in the leadership element of it, where you're doing more strategic advice with clients and you're more in partnership. But your management and operations starts to become a flatter service delivery round, where you maybe have managers, subject matter experts, project support people working alongside each other. So to make that change, the big requirement for time. So you mentioned, we need a few hours a week at the leadership time. We need a couple of hours here and there, but actually people are going to have to spend time thinking on business improvement. They're going to have to spend time learning new skills. There's a challenge here to free up that time.
Absolutely.
So actually, maybe that's starting to give us an idea of really what we want from any technology that's going to enable that. And so I guess if you're going to make any investment case for technology, the first thing you're probably going to start with is I'm going to expect it to reduce cost. But what we're looking for here is we're looking specifically at increasing capacity and throughput, but we want to free up people for, let's call it, higher value activities. So we want them to be available for the advisory work, but actually we want them to be available to gain the skills in the short term.
That's right.
And of course, quality needs to be assured, and there needs to be enhanced security and compliance. So you mentioned at the very beginning, Ramesh, that you come from a big tech background, Tata and Harman, but your vision was about actually making the benefits of that technology available for all. So really what you've got is it's less about the technology, more about the delivery model, isn't it?
Absolutely, spot on, Richard, because to Alan's point earlier as well, where you have the chicken and egg situation, where how do I free up capacity to do more productive tasks, but then I don't have the time to free up that capacity. That's where technology of this nature can help. Unfortunately, everybody is following the traditional model of, going by a big, large implementation plan for this technology to be in place. What we've done is we've enabled organizations, if any size, to adopt technology, which effectively is a digital worker. You can adopt a digital worker in your business who can be trained, it can be he or she, can be trained on your processes, on your activities in a matter of weeks. And we'll come to that. So in our world, the digital worker is called Joe. Joe is a general neutral term. It can be John or a Josephine. And Joe can actually learn from you very, very quickly on all your repeatable, boring, mundane tasks. So that when you want to focus on the higher value activities, like Alan was alluding to earlier, Joe can very quickly enable you to do that. So you free up, you can start incrementally. You can start freeing up 2, 3, 4 hours of your daily time. And in a matter of a couple of months, you can pretty much free up most of your time, which is spent on doing all the repetitive stuff so that you can focus on the value added stuff. And Joe can do all the boring bits for you.
So this is the technology that kind of firms like PwC, EY are implementing, and they've spent millions on this software. But they've done it. The standard method is they've worked out that automation or robotic process automation, to give it its full name, will have a big bearing. But they've done that as we're going to spend a lot of money and we're going to realize the benefits over 2-3 years. Your model's somewhat different, isn't it?
Absolutely, because that works very well for the larger firms where you have significantly high volumes to be able to do that. But for a small to medium enterprise, you probably are looking for a certain capacity that can be enabled through a digital workmate very quickly. And if we have something that's ready on the cloud, so our digital workers are cloud enabled, can be trained on your processes very quickly. You can literally hire a digital worker with zero upfront cost on a monthly subscription basis. So just very simply, Richard, think about it like hiring a temporary worker in your workplace. What would you do? You would tell the person, come on in, just look at what I'm doing, learn it, and repeat what I'm doing. That's exactly what you would do with Joe.
So that means that you're able to help people work smarter and deliver that change by targeting processes with high potential. So those processes that are, I guess, manual heavy, that is taking a core member of the team hours per week to do, but actually it's number crunching, it's gathering data, it's working data across different practice management systems, emails, spreadsheets, and automating it.
Exactly.
And that delivery model, so it's a pay as you go, isn't it? You are deciding which process to work with, automate it, and pay as you go. It means that you can, for those of you familiar with the minimum viable product, but you can decide, actually, I'm going to do this increment.
Yep.
I'm going to automate that. I'm going to realize the benefits from that. I'm going to invest those benefits in doing the next stage, and so on, to kind of help you kind of work quickly.
Exactly.
So across automating a process in your world is 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, isn't it?
Exactly. So, I mean, think about it to when you talked about the minimum viable product. It can be processes such as generating payroll. It can be invoice generation for your end customers. It could be, reconciliation of all the payments received and making sure it's on track. Literally every day, accounting firms go through a number of these processes. Some of it, could be towards the end of the month. Some of it could be, spread across the month. But if you look at any activity, the first thing you need to do is, where is my effort going today? What am I spending, repetitive? Where are my repetitive activities? Where am I spending manual effort? That's your candidate process. Then the thing to do is, does it make sense to automate this process? Is it repeatable? Is it rule-based? Is it a simple thing that can be done? And can it be done economically? If I'm paying a monthly subscription for it, is it cheaper for me to do it manually, or can I get Joe to do it? And Joe's more accurate, more faster. And then it moves. That's effectively a business case.
So you help the clients through step 1 and 2. You will give them a business case back and say, for this process that's costing you X hours per week, it will cost you Y pounds. And
absolutely.
And if there's a clear benefit, you proceed to step 4.
Exactly. And in most cases, it's around 30 to 50% of savings that we've seen.
So what you then do is, through your sitting with Nelly, as we used to call it when we were training people, if we brought an apprentice in, is that allows you to document the process.
Yes.
Now, I imagine that in itself has some value for firms, is they now know what their process is.
Yes, because in 9 out of 10 cases, this process is in the head of a business user.
And there's lots of single points of failure out there of what if so-and-so gets hit by a bus tomorrow, those kind of risks. So you document that process.
Yes.
You then train Joe, your digital workmates, to do it, and then you'll demonstrate that it delivers to the guideline.
Absolutely.
Which then means that controlled rollout can take place. But we're seeing there in 3 to 5 weeks, those benefits are realised.
100%.
And that is the opportunity in there is that there's no cost until you've decided that there's going to be a benefit.
Exactly. And it's not going to cost you even after that to develop it. All that you're seeing is you're just paying a running cost for Joe to run on those processes on a monthly basis.
So Alan, that gives a big opportunity. I imagine that in every practice there's that one person who, if I was going to have somebody work on business improvement, it would be so-and-so. Mm-hmm. But that so-and-so is also going to be the busiest person in the practice because they're the person everybody goes to get things done. If in that stage one, you're able to see, well, actually 3, 4, 5 hours a week of that person's time are spent doing this, and it's a repetitive task.
Absolutely, it's a great opportunity.
Yeah. And I guess that is those guided there is if you feel like a robot when you're doing the task, a robot can do it. It doesn't matter what applications you're doing it in. If you're not deploying judgment, yeah, it can be automated.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
Okay. So what we've got there is there's a means then of increasing the capacity. A digital worker's fast as well, isn't it? That's usually where the cost saving comes in.
Very quick. It's 10 to 20 times faster than what you could imagine, and it doesn't get bored, so it doesn't make errors.
And it works 3 shifts a day.
Yeah,
24/7.
Correct.
It doesn't pack up and go home at 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
The best part is it can handle your backlog while you're sleeping. You come to a fresh, clean desk.
Yes, please.
So we have opportunities there to actually increase capacity and reduce cost, and free up resource there for a higher value activity. So I guess we're getting to our 30-minute promise. So if we draw all these points together, change is coming. We knew that already. But building walls is one thing, but how do you build windmills in this environment? Advisory represents an opportunity, but you have to know where to start and be aware of the barriers that are going to
and how far you want to take it.
Yes. To do that, you can't transform overnight. So you have to consider the steps and the impact on the people, process, and technology. And as I say, we've been through at a very, very high level your kind of 5 phases, Alan. Mm-hmm. But that really is a good place to start.
It's a great place to start.
In figuring out what those steps are. And then what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to work through how you're going to free up time and capacity to deal with some of the change leadership, upskilling of people, and deploying those new skills profitably. You can reduce the risk by doing that in small steps.
Exactly. And one of the things also, Richard, there is you aren't changing any technology in your workplace. Mm-hmm. The digital worker is going to come and use your technology that you're currently using, your processes, your systems, with zero technical change. So you're not disrupted in this as part of this change.
Mm-hmm. So as we kind of wrap that up, I can see we've got a couple of questions come up. Looking in here is, I hope everybody was able to hear Alan through. So we kind of covered that one off. I will come to Rishi's question in a minute. Is we might just want to have a look at that while I ask one of the other more straightforward question. Is Ramesh, the question here for you here is, what processes have you already automated?
A number of runs, Richard. In accounting firms particularly, we've done a lot of work around helping audits, where you need to do a lot of reconciliation and make sure that the auditing is right. We've done around invoice generation and compliance. Yes, we are actually exploring some payroll-based activities as well at the moment.
We have an alarm. It's not a fire alarm. I think we can keep going.
I think somebody just exited through the fire door.
So if you can bear with us. So you've looked at processes across the finance function and across kind of accountancy practices.
Yes, we've looked through both finance function and accountancy practices, and the biggest benefit from an accountancy practice is all the points that Alan said earlier, where you had highly qualified staff doing very low value activity, and that's the place we are focusing on freeing up at the moment.
Okay. So somebody else has asked Alan, how long does it take to make the journey? And I guess there's a simple answer there. It's a never-ending journey, isn't it?
Well, that's right. I think a sustained 18 months to 2 years will get you well on the way.
Yep. Another question that we've got in there is, so somebody who's just broken out of a corporate finance role to do this type of advisory work rather than traditional accounting work, their institutes of management accountants changed and their background lends themselves to that type of work. Do we have any advice on not falling into the traditional role, as ultimately they'll need to start generating an income ASAP? In fact, true to form, the first client has been a compliance client. So is there any advice in that situation?
I think like any other business marketing exercise, you have to define the kind of client you want for your future practice and go after them, and then make your mind up. When you're starting out, you need to take on all sorts of stuff you won't take on later, but just keep it under control.
Yeah. So, and another question here is, how do we train our digital worker? Do they need programming skills? And this is a really good challenge. Is how much time of my team is going to be needed while we train this digital worker?
Right. I was thinking when I'll be asked that question. The good news is you don't need to spend any time training a digital worker. So the service that Cevitr offers as part of our model it's all inclusive. So that includes software licenses, the infrastructure, the cost of analyzing the consultancy behind it, developing the process, which is effectively training Joe, and running it regularly to produce an output as per assigned SLA. So all you see is a monthly subscription cost. There is nothing else for you to need to do. So you as a business focus on the outputs generated in the fastest possible way.
Okay, so that is going back to that 5-step process that we highlighted earlier. So I have a job. It's costing me, for the sake of argument, it's costing me £2,000 a month to do this job across my operations team. What your team are doing, Ramesh, is figuring out what it is and figuring out what it costs, and you will present back a business case that includes analysis, training, delivery, support, an element of change control as kind of that process evolves, and providing that price back. And if the business case stacks up, if it costs less by a margin, it makes sense to everybody, and away they go. That is the model, isn't it?
Exactly, Richard. So if you think about it this way, today you're doing the process manually. There is somebody actually spending time and effort doing it. Tomorrow, it's going to be Joe doing that process at a specified time or based on a specific input. What would it cost for Joe to do it? That's the price you're going to see. And it's at a faster, more accurate output that's going to produce. So once we have a look at the process and we tell you that this is what it would mean in terms of automating it, this is how much it would cost, you're not going to have to do anything else. All that you need to spend time with us is showing the process manually. This is how it is done manually. That's all you need to do, focused on. After that, Joe takes care of everything.
Fabulous. And so we've got a couple of minutes left. There's another question for Alan here, which is, what services or practices offering that have been easy to roll out to clients? I mean, I guess the data and the insight phases within the roadmap are kind of the logical place to start, aren't they?
Yes. and the problem solving ones aren't that difficult once you get into them and you've had a bit of training. And if you're regularly running strategy sessions within your practice, then doing it for clients is also easy. So it depends your level of competence. And again, back to the 5 phases, where you are now, where you want to be, and what the route map is to get you there.
Yeah. And it comes back to that, recognizing you've got a lot of data already. So simple things that you can do with that data is, if you can have an impact on a client's cash flow, that could be a transformative service that you can offer that actually is just using information you already have.
I think that's the power of that data. I think most accountants think about, well, I need it to do the VAT return, or I need it to do the annual accounts. Well, actually, if you start looking forwards and what else you can do, there's all sorts of that comes to mind that is really powerful and easy to do.
Fantastic. So I think as we come through to the end now, there's one last question, which was, well, actually, could we have a copy of the slides? As always, we will be making this available as a recording. So we have, in our previous webinars, the productivity gaps and missed opportunity is available to view on demand. You can find links on the VaultConnect website and the Cevitr website. Rewriting the Future of the SME Accounting Firm is also available, where we kind of go into actually what some of those changes are and how to address some of the productivity gaps. So that has been the Advisory Opportunity, A Brighter Future for Smarter Practices. If there are more questions that you would like answered, I'm quite happy to field any that haven't been asked. So if you want to email them to me, my name's Richard, and my email is richard@vaultconnect.co.uk. Or if you would like to get a question directly to Alan, your email address?
Alan@MRWC for Charlie, S for Sugar, MRWCS.com.
And if you'd like to know more about Cevitr, Joe, or Digital Workmates, Ramesh?
Yeah, just send it across to ramesh@cevitr.com. That's RAMESH@cevitr.com.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for your time this morning. I hope that's proved useful. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Yeah, well.